you were talking about the Republican base, and there's a Democratic base as well. I want to ask about two components of that base. First, African American voters. A larger percentage than in the past, of which voted for a Republican president, George Bush, on the issue of gay marriage, the last election, that's 2004. Do you see divisions coming within the what used to be a pretty solid block of African American voters, which used to constitute such a, and still does, of course, such an important part of the Democratic base, over issues such as gay marriage and other moral, so-called moral issues?
Yeah, I think he penetrated, and it's a small little beachhead into that solid African American vote for Democrats. And I think that Karl Rove and George Bush are smart enough to widen that. And the way they're widening it, and I've tried to wake up my Democratic colleagues, is through the faith-based initiative. Not only are they talking about values and blowing the horn against gay marriage, et cetera, but they are giving money to churches. It is one of the biggest giveaways, partisan giveaways going. Right out of the Treasury, they are awarding grants without any real competitive procedures. It's amazing. $4 billion went out last year in these faith-based initiative grants. From the departments, they have special arrangements where they can channel a grant to a particular denomination, church, good guy, and it's not been a great secret, but the Democrats don't understand the implications of that. When you give money to people, when you give money that they can use for little programs, recreational program for the kids, a program to help with people coming in from prison, there's certain kinds of things that Bushes have specialized in. They make an impression out there which erodes the base that you once had, because they're going to see, Democrats give us rhetoric, and talk, but they stop giving us any concrete programs. And when I was in New York City as commissioner of the Community Development Agency over the Community Action Program under John Lindsay, I had a budget of $75 million. We employed, we had 500 agents, little agencies under us. We employed 5,000 people. They expected to see that go on. I'm greeted still as a commissioner. More important than being a congressman, the commissioner was in charge of giving out the money, and all that collapsed. And whereas New York City was getting $10 billion from the federal government, and New York City is getting now $10 billion less from the federal government than it got when I was a state senator. There's steady withdrawal of money from the federal government, and the state has not picked it up, and the city really has not picked it up either in terms of programs for the poor. The city and the state have programs for low-income and moderate-income housing. They completely ignore public housing. They took away the funding for public housing in the city and in the state. They expect the poor people out there. We got a large public housing population, almost 1 million people, in public housing. They expect them to still keep supporting the Democratic Party. They, at a point, what they're doing is apathetic now. The voter registration and turnout has gone down greatly because they just feel they're being abandoned. But they'll turn to the Republican Party if those faith-based grants begin to get out there in greater number. And Bush understands what he's doing. He's going to win the Hispanic population with an immigration bill. As soon as this election is over, Bush and Rove will take the initiative again. We're going to have an immigration bill which is going to win the Hispanic, a large portion of the Hispanic vote. He's not going to give up that 40% he got last time. They're going to broaden that. They're going to win some more of the black vote if we don't wake up to the fact that we have to have more concrete programs for poor people.
And another part of the base, which has been essential, but whose power also has changed and which has also been fractured amongst different concerns in both political parties, is unions. How have you seen, you're a champion of workers' rights, how have you seen the influence and cohesiveness of unions change with respect to dealing with Congress?
Well, I've been here for 24 years, and that whole 24 years I've been on the Education It was the Education and Labor Committee under the Democrats when I came here. Now it's the Education and the Workforce Committee. I've been the chairman, the ranking Democrat on the Subcommittee on Workforce Protections since the Republicans took over. And working directly with unions has been my career here. It's been a defensive operation. The Republicans know clearly, again, they're very smart, starting with Gingrich. The destruction of labor power is absolutely necessary if you want to establish a permanent Republican government in this country. I mean, one of the big pillars of the Democratic Party, they understand, and they've gone after the labor unions and done it successfully.
But also,
we have been
many
able
union
to,
members have become Republicans as well, right?
well, part of the way they go after them is through the back door, the values issues, you know, the biggest way is that they just have prevented the union movement from increasing. No help has been given. The lack of any kind of legislation which helps working people, including minimum wage, only discourages people who pour that much more. What are the unions doing for us, or what are they going to do for us? And the unions themselves have been confused about how they should proceed in terms of they into the same trap the Democrats are into in terms of holding on to the suburban middle class, holding on to their union constituency, who in many cases are doing pretty well. They have jobs, they have wages far above the minimum wage, they have health care. But because they haven't broadened their base, they're losing, you know, General Motors comes out and says, we're taking away health care benefits from retirees. And, you know, they're losing out because in the American power configuration, you got to continually expand your power base. If you don't have power, you don't get any results. And these are some basics nobody seems to understand. The unions cannot be declining in numbers and have the same influence on the government they had before, and they are declining rapidly. And one of the problems in that decline is that they're looking at the minority populations and not accepting the challenge of going. That's where the poor people are, in the inner cities, in the rural areas. The white ethnics have made it, many of them, most of them. You can't hesitate if you're going to be a representative of working families. You can't hesitate because of race or ethnicity.
And finally, I just want to ask you one question about your own personal style. You're well known for liking to speak on the floor of the House, even if there's no one there, just because you have things you want to say, and sometimes even doing it in rap verse. Tell me why you have enjoyed that. What has been fun about that, or interesting about that, or satisfying about that, in terms of all the things you care about for you?
Well, it's been an opportunity. When you go in the House of the Floor and C-SPAN is broadcasting it, it doesn't matter that the floor is empty. There are quite a number of people watching in my district as well as everywhere else. So the fact that they're not there on the floor, it doesn't matter. And if they were on the floor, we don't convince anybody on the floor really without speeches. You know, the decisions are made and the die is cast long before folks get to the floor in terms of how they're going to vote. But it's an opportunity to deal with a lot of issues that don't come directly under my committee, one. Two, it's an opportunity to deal with the current issues of the day, and I have opinions on that. And most of all, it's an opportunity to link up the current issues of the day and the broader issues to the specific concerns. So you'll find that, although I've made a lot of one-hour speeches on the floor, you'll find there's a pattern. They're usually about education or about working families and conditions for working families, no matter how I approach it. Savings and loans scandal, which broke in the first 5 years that I was here, outrageous amounts of money down the drain and so forth. Well, I saw this money down the drain from the taxpayers that was not being put into education. It was not being put into health care, you know, with that kind of ripoff of the government. So there's a pattern, and I don't think I've been frivolous. The rap poems come from, the frustration and the anger was greatest at a point where I started listening to some of these kids who were doing rap, you know. And I just forgot about the foul language that they were using. I liked the rhythm. You know, but I've always wanted to be a writer. I've studied poetry all my life, so I recognize that in the elements of rhyme and rhythm and metaphors and it's poetry. No matter how bad the contents may be, it's still poetry. You know, Chaucer said a lot of bad things. You know, and pornographic things too, but there is a certain. It's a matter of style and delivery and emotion behind it and so forth. So it caught my attention, and I said, well, there are political issues that you can be able to handle that way too. I feel strongly about it, and I know how to handle rhyme and rhythm, and I'm not as good as the guys who rap, and I don't try to be a rapper. I don't recite rap. I read my my poems on the floor. I might read them somewhere, but I don't pretend to be a rapper. But I have I think, an ear, and I hear other young people who are rappers recite. I'm close. I'm getting close to what they're doing. But most important, I think it's an exciting form of poetry that has a great future and a lot of applications that are yet to come in terms of our society.
What will you miss most about being in the House?
Oh, I am aware of the fact that the 535 members, 435 in the House and 100 in the Senate, are among the most powerful people in the world. You know, no matter what people say about politicians and try to put them down and so forth, most of us are aware of a tremendous amount of power we have, even those at the bottom who seldom get a chance to say the things they want to say or get a chance to get their hands in the appropriations pot the way the others are. Everybody here is called upon several times a year to make votes that are very important. Everybody here has a platform that most people in the world don't have. Anything I put in the congressional record, millions of copies are going to be made of it. It's going to be reproduced. You know, a lot of bills I introduce are ideas that I put in. I want to express them. I put them in the congressional record. I know that many people are going to read them, and not just now, but forever. You know, so it is a very powerful position, and I'm aware of it. It's a very pivotal position here in terms of macro issues and organization, and back in my own community in terms of micro and organized people. They respect me. You know, certain things get done. So I'm going to miss that. You know, I have to hope that it's going to carry over. Once you're a congressman, like being a colonel or a general, you always let people call you by your last title. Let them keep calling me congressman. But I hope to use what I've learned here and galvanize some of my frustrations in a way which still has an impact on what happens in the public arena.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you.